The older generation has failed. The present formula is not working. It is the youth that must lead. It is the youth that must do better.
Global examples ගත්තම සමහර world powers handle කරන කට්ටිය සමහර ලෝකේ හොඳම රටවල් handle කරන youth එක. ඒකට අපි දැනටමත් පෙන්නලා තියෙනවා youth එක කොච්චර හොඳද කියලා අපි වැඩිමහල් පරම්පරාවට සාපේක්ෂව රටවල් පාලනය කරන්න leadership එක දෙන්න.
Youth have the right to participate.
As citizens, we have the biggest role to play. We need to make sure that we hold the executive accountable.
There are racism, there are problems in the system, but younger generation keeps on pointing the problem to the system.
Dudley Senanayaka Mahathya had the අගමැති වෙලා ඉන්න කාලේ he had the courtesy to give up the government because he said that okay I can't handle it anymore. Okay අද වෙනකොට ඉන්න පාලකයෝ ඒක කරයිද?
Ayubowan. Radical ideas, intellectual minds, but young hearts have all gathered here in your favorite television show, Seethala Eethala, once again.
සමාජයේ සාකච්ඡාවට වාජනය වෙන විවිධ හැඩතලයන්ගෙන් යුත් ප්‍රශ්න පිළිබඳව යුගයේ තරුණයින් ඔබේ හදවතට ආමන්ත්‍රණය කරන වැඩසටහන සීතල ඊතල.
And before we go into today's topic, let's have a look at the speakers.
ජනතාව විසින් බහුතර ජනතාවක් ඍජුව හෝ වක්‍රව පාලනයට නතු කර ගැනීම ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදය කියලා සරලව අර්ථකථනය කරන්නට පුළුවන්. වචනේ ගැඹුරු බව නිසාම සමාජයේ අද බහුතරයක් දෙනා කතාවට ලක් නොවන මාතෘකාවක් සීතල ඊතල වැඩසටහනේ තරුණයන් 6 දෙනෙක් අපි තෝරගෙන සාකච්ඡාවට භාජනය කරන්නට ලෑස්ති වෙලා ඉන්නවා. අද අපි කතා කරමු ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදය සහ තාරුණ්‍ය පිළිබඳව. මේ තරුණයන්ට මොන විදිහටද ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදය බලපෑම් එල්ල කරන්න කියලා.
Yes, Hiranya. A democracy is a government of the people, for the people, by the people. A very famous quote. But is it so? Let's have a look into the Sri Lankan context of things. Youth engagement, franchise, nepotism, so many sub-areas that we can talk about this, especially in the context of Sri Lanka. And don't worry, as usual, for this, 6 amazing speakers have been set up to give this perspective from all walks of life for you on democracy and youth. To start off, we have Tuhan Sapumanage.
Thank you, Sandro. Thank you, Hiranya. Democracy and youth. ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදය සහ තාරුණ්‍ය. අපි කොහොමද ලංකාවට මේ ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදය කියන concept එක, democracy කියන concept එක බලපාන්නේ? අපි තව speakersලා ඉන්න නිසා මම කැමති මේ topic එකට ප්‍රවේශ වෙන්න. අදිතාලම දාන අනිත් අයටත් මේ ස්පීච් එක පටන් ගන්න. මම කැමති ඉස්සෙල්ලා මේ topic එක දෙකට කරන්න. එකක් තමයි votersලා and අනිත් කඩේ තමයි candidatesලා. ඡන්ද අපේක්ෂකයන් සහ ඡන්දදායකයන්. ඡන්දදායකයන් විදියට අපි ගන්නකොට අපි හැමෝම අයිති වෙන එකක් තමයි අපි හැමෝම තමයි youth එක. youth එක and අපි වැඩිමහල් පරම්පරාව අනිත් කඩේ තමයි ඡන්ද අපේක්ෂකයන් candidatesලා. candidatesලා මම පටන් ගත්තොත් එහෙම ලංකාවේ තාරුණ්‍ය ගොඩක් අඩු නිසා candidatesලා මම කැමති සමහර global examples ටිකක් ගන්න කොහොමද youth එක මේකට බලපාන මේ youth එක කොහොමද democracy එක to uplift the democracy, how the youth is doing what they can do. Some global examples would be Sanna Marin, Finland Prime Minister of Finland, got to office at around 34 years old and doing an excellent job as one of the youngest prime ministers in the world. Second, Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, 35 again, and doing an excellent job, one of the best countries in the world in terms of how they handled the pandemic, and she's doing an excellent job as well. Then Emmanuel Macron, the the President of France, and he was 39 when he was being elected and doing an excellent job. එතකොට ලංකාව එක්සාම්පල්ස් නැති වුණාට අපි ග්ලෝබල් එක්සාම්පල්ස් ගත්තම සමහර වර්ල්ඩ් පවර්ස් හැන්ඩල් කරන කට්ටිය සමහර ලෝකේ හොඳම රටවල් හැන්ඩල් කරන යූත් එක. එතකොට අපි දැනටමත් පෙන්නලා තියෙනවා යූත් එක කොච්චර හොඳද කියලා අපි වැඩිමහල් පරම්පරාවට සාපේක්ෂව රටවල් පාලනය කරන්න ලීඩර්ෂිප් එක දෙන්න. and අපි වෝටර්ස්ලා විදියට ගත්තොත් එහෙම ලංකාවේ ඕන තරම් එක්සාම්පල්ස් තියෙනවා. මම කැමතියි ඔයගොල්ලන්ට ඉම්ප්‍රූව් වෙන්න තුනක් කියන්න. ෆස්ට් එක්සාම්පල් එක තමයි දැන් පොලිසිස් තියෙනවා ඩීනසියේ දැක්ම කියයි සෞභාග්‍ය දැක්ම කියයි මේ හැම එක්සාම්පල් එකක්ම ඔයා ඉස්සෙල්ලා ඩිසයිඩ් කරනවා වෝට් කරන්නේ ඔයා වෝට් කරපු අපේක්ෂකයාට ඔයා පොලිසිය එකවත් දැනගෙනද වෝට් කරේ කියලා. මොකද ගොඩක් සමහර කට්ටිය වෝට් කරේ පොලිසිය දැනගන්නේ මේ තමන් අම්මයි තාත්තා වෝට් කරපු පක්ෂයට නැත්නම් තමන්ගේ යාළුවා වෝට් කරපු පක්ෂයට. එහෙම නැතුව ඉස්සෙල්ලා දැනගන්නවා පොලිසිය එක දැනගෙනද වෝට් කරේ කියලා. පළවෙනි එක පොලිසිය එක දැනගන්න. දෙවෙනි එක තමයි ෆලෝ අප් කරන්න මේ කියන එක කරනවාද කියලා. මොකද මේගොල්ලන්ට අයිලා ඕන බොරුවක් කියලා ඊළඟ පාරක් තාම අපේ කට්ටිය කියලා වෝට් කරනවා. ඒක වෙන්න දෙන්න එපා. ෆස්ට් පොයින්ට් එක. සෙකන්ඩ් පොයින්ට් එක තමයි ඔයා වෝට් කාඩ් කාවට පස්සේ ඔයා ඒකට එග්‍රී වෙන්න ඕනේ නැහැ කියන හැම දෙයකටම. මොකක් හරි වැරද්දක් කරොත් එහෙම ඩිස්ඇග්‍රී වෙන්න පුළුවන් වෙන. and ඒගොල්ලෝ මොකක් හරි දෙයක් කරොත් විපක්ෂයේ හරි දෙයක් කරත් ඒකට එග්‍රී වෙන්න පුළුවන්. and ඒක තමයි අපේ පරම්පරාව ගොඩක් කරලා නැති දේ. ඒක ඕගොල්ලන්ට වෙනස් කරන්න පුළුවන්. මම දැකලා තියෙනවා ඕන තරම් Instagram එකේ කවුරුත් තමන් පාට පක්ෂ වලට නෙමෙයි සපෝට් කරන්නේ පොලිසිස් වලට. ඒක කන්ටිනියු කරන්න. and මම හිතනවා as a concluding thought මේ වෙනස ඇත්තටම වෙමින් පවතිනවා and දේශපාලනඥයන්ට දෙක තේරෙනවා. මොකද මං ගියා මේ එක්තරා ගවර්න්මන්ට් දේශපාලනඥයෙක් ඇමතිවරයෙක් සාමාන්‍යයෙන් ප්‍රධාන පෙළේ මාලිකාවට ආවම කියන්නේ අපේ පක්ෂ තමයි ලංකාවේ දෙන පක්ෂෙ මෙච්චර අවුරුදු ගණනක් ඉඳලා තියෙනවා මෙයා මෙහෙම ඇවිල්ලා තියෙන්නේ. හැබැයි යා තරුණ කට්ටිය ඉන්න රේඩියෝ channel එකට ආවට පස්සේ එයා කතා කරන්නේ කොහොමද තරුණ කට්ටිය ඇවිල්ලා පොලිසිස් වල උදව් කරන්නේ සමහර කට්ටිය ඇවිල්ලා කොහොමද පොලිසි මේකින් වලට එන්නේ කියන එක. ඉතින් මං හිතන්නේ ඒගොල්ලෝ දන්නවා මේ වෙනස වෙනවා කියලා. ඕගොල්ලන්ට තියෙන මේකෙන් පුළුවන් තරම් ප්‍රයෝජන අරගෙන පොලිසි මේකින් වලටත් ඒ වගේම තමන්ගේ යාළුවන්වත් දැනුවත් කරලා ඩෙමොක්‍රසි එක ඇක්ටිව්ලි පාටිසිපේට් කරලා ලංකාව හොඳ තැනකට අරන් යන්න. ස්තුතියි.
තුහන්ගේ කතාව තුහන් පටන් ගන්න ලෝකයේ තාරුණ්‍ය නියෝජනය කරන ජනතා නායකයින් ගණනාවකගේ උදාහරණත් එක්ක ඔය රටවල් මොන විදිහටද සංවර්ධනය වෙලා තියෙන දියුණුව කරා ගිහින් තියෙන්නේ තරුණයින්ගේ තරුණ නායකයින්ගේ මේ සඳහා ලැබිච්ච සහයෝගය මොන විදිහද කියලා අපි උදාහරණ ගණනාවක් එක කතා කරා. ඒ විතරක් නෙවෙයි තරුණ ඔබට අලුත් අදහසක් අරගෙන එන ඔබ ඡන්ද දායකයෙක් බවට පත්වන විට මොන අරමුණින්ද ඔබ ඡන්දය ලබා දෙන්නේ? පක්ෂපාත බලන්නේ නැතුව ඔවුන්ගේ ප්‍රතිපත්ති අනුගමනය කරන්නට පුළුවන් වටපිටාවක් ඔබ හදා ගන්න. ඔවුන්ගේ ප්‍රතිපත්ති වලට ඡන්දය ලබා දෙන්න කියලා තුහන් තරුණ ඔබට ආමන්ත්‍රණය කරනවා. සෙන්ඩ්‍රා.
Definitely, Hirana, he sets out an overlay and a cross-section to, like he mentioned in his speech, to the topic at hand. And he mentioned also how the youth involvement in a democracy plays a major role in it as well, among other important points. I believe that he will definitely bring out in the discussion round as well. And now, moving forward to our new speaker, let's have it for Lahan Sandul.
Okay, like Tuhan was going in the policies, I'll start with the literal democracy and what is the democracy that we understand. Actually, we are a cluster. Youth is a cluster where we would ask someone's opinion without taking our opinion. So I took my opportunity to Google what's democracy. I know that's kind of childish, but I did my searchings. So in Google, it says system of government by whole population or all the eligible member of the state, typically through elected representatives. What is this? This means you elect someone to the parliament or, at an election, and you give them the power to do what they are necessary to do. But everything is depending on one option. What is that? It's our opinion. We are raised in a way we listen to others. I just came across a motivational speaker in Goldcast. His name is Adam Royal. He says we live in an environment, a society which consumes everyone's thoughts. And he says a brilliant statement. He says like this: the makeup they are selling to make you feel prettier is the same makeup you buy to make yourself not to feel shittier. Why is that? That's the greatest statement. We are raised in a place where our parents give the opinion. And of course, when it comes to democracy, we all know the famous people who plays the democracy role is the politicians. A famous role. But then again, as younger generation, we should understand the concept of democracy and how it leads. And the next point is, voting is not only a part of democracy. People think that is democracy. No, that is not. There are a few cornerstones when it comes to democracy. I would mention them: freedom of assembly and speech, inclusiveness, equity, equality, and then comes voting and right to life. What is equality? And it's a famous thing, equity and equality. Are we given the same opportunity? Is there gender equality in Sri Lanka? I don't think so. I don't think so. Everyone is not given the exact same opportunity at once. There are racism, there are problems in the system, but younger generation keeps on pointing the problem to the system. Is it right? I don't think so. So, as a speaker, as an influencer, I admire if you could be in the system, if you could be a part of the system and you can raise a finger towards the system. And remember one thing, if you point a finger, 3 of your own fingers are pointing at yourself. Remember that. So make sure you never give up, be in the right position, get into the system, and then you can control the world and democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much ලහන්. අපි ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදයේ විදිහට සලකන්නේ ඡන්දය කියන කාරණාව විතරද? ඔබ දැනුවත් වෙලා හිටියද ඊට අමතරව කරුණු ගණනාවක් ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදයට යටත් වෙලා තියෙනවා කියලා? ලහන් ඒ කරුණ බොහොම අපූර්වට ඉස්මතු කරනවා. සමානකම, සමානාත්මතාවය, ජීවත් වීමේ අයිතිය, ඡන්දය මේ කියන කරුණු ගණනාවම ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදය කියන වචනේ යටතේද අයිති වෙලා තියෙනවා. ඒ වගේ අවසානයේදී ලහන් බොහොම අපූර්ව කියමනක් එක්ක කතාව ඉවර කරන සෙන්ටර් මම ඒකට බොහොම කැමති වුණා. මොකද තමන් කෙනෙක්ට නියෝගයක් දෙන්නට එහෙම නැත්නම් අවවාදයක් හෝ කුමන හෝ තමන්ගේ මතය ඉදිරිපත් කරන්නට කලින් ඇඟිල්ලක් දික් කරලා මොහොතකට හිතලා බලන්න අනිත් ඇඟිලි තුනම ඔබ දෙසට එල්ල වෙලා තියෙන. තව කෙනෙක්ට උපදෙස් දෙන්නට, තව කෙනෙකුට නියෝගයක් දෙන්නට කලින් ඔබ ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙන්න. එවිට ඔබට පුළුවන් වෙයි තව කෙනෙක්ට නියෝග කරලා සාර්ථක රටක් ගොඩනගන්න. ලහන් කියපු විදිහට සෙන්ටර්.
Definitely, Hiranya. I think a lot of people misassociate the fact that I think this is to be spoken in the coming few with the coming few speakers as well. Is the democracy limited to politicians, or is it something more? Something that Lahan highlighted to us, and something we can go into further discussion as well. He also mentioned how society is, how a democracy, how our society is built based on the opinions of others. And I like how he pointed out the grassroots level, not problem, but the grassroots level tool that people, a democracy uses in order to make itself sustainable. Opinions. Think about it. Is it your opinion that you use to vote? Is it your opinion that you are influenced by, or is it the opinions of others collectively? Something we can definitely think about. Thank you, Lahan, for that philosophical view on that. That being said, it's time for our next speaker, Tarangi Muthukumarana.
It is our elected officials that have granted a pardon to a convicted murderer, appointed a murderer to high office, wonders why people can't live on 5,000 rupees for a month, states the importance of national security in a debate relating to sanitary napkins, has ousted a sitting Prime Minister to appoint another, and let's not even get started on the ill discipline that occurred during the coup as well as before and after. And finally, through the 20th Amendment, where independent commissions and a free justice system is out of the way, has assaulted democracy. As a member of the Election Commission, Mr. Hool once said, "It baffles me why we have to speak to these people, calling them honorable. Dishonorable is the right prefix. The older generation has failed. The present formula is not working. It is the youth that must lead. It is the youth that must do better. It is the youth that must promote the culture of democracy, good governance, reconciliation, and sustainable peace." The young people are affected by the democracy. They are affected by politics, but they're often not engaged. We hear many people of the youth saying that they're not interested. They don't think that the system can change. They despise the political system. The youth feel alienated from the process. The only thing that most youth do today is to take part in the process of voting. That also not so much informed. Apart from voting, not many of the youth get involved in making decisions, not in the local government level, not even on a national level. The young people will be poorly represented until such time that they decide that they need to demand a healthy representative in democracy. Many youth believe that running for elections is the only way to be of political participation. But actually going down to the grassroots, understanding the needs of these people, working towards justice to them will also make a difference. Politicians today lack the interaction with the common people. They lack the needs, to know the needs of these common people, and this is where the youth should do better. The state must invest in the next generation and signal that their perspectives are important. The immense youth population can help with the development process. They can help with reducing unemployment, with reducing poverty, with reducing the gaps in governance. The state must provide the awareness that leads to informed voting and make the young people aware of their political and civil rights. Finally, there is an imbalance which is immediately seen in female counterparts. These include injustice in party politics, financial barriers, violence, character assassination, a lack of civil support, breach of their privacy, the patriarchy, gender stereotypes, and myths, where from the ground level women are told what their place is, that their place is at home, that their place is not in governance, it is not in politics, it is not on the public platform. And therefore, even with many educational achievements and the fact that they care about the well-being of the people, these women want to stay at home and think that that's their place. The youth should be involved in politics by understanding the needs of the present and the future. As the next generation political leaders, the Sri Lankan youth have a critical role to play in bolstering an inclusive democratic process that is responsive to everybody's needs. Change needs to come, and it needs to come from the youth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tarangi, for that very insightful speech. Shiran, I don't know if you noticed, she mentioned a list of things, and from that, very few of those lists were how the government issues 5,000 rupees for a family to live by. As impractical as that seems, anybody would agree. And how she also mentioned a lot of things along the lines of how murderers were elected to the parliament as well. Lots of infringements of the democracy, of the phenomenon of democracy itself that she mentioned, especially with strong emphasis to Sri Lanka and how that works. Thank you, Tarangi, for fearlessly mentioning all of these points. I believe something that needs to be telecasted on national television. At the same time, she mentioned how the people who uphold this democracy are the same people who should be right now, because of the things that they do, be called dishonorable rather than honorable. I believe satire used, yes, but I believe that it is appropriate when it comes to certain acts. But how can we change this? How can we go forward? She mentioned a lot about youth empowerment and especially female representation, where when it comes to female in general, what are the stereotypes they face in when it comes to politics, when it comes to engaging themselves in there. I mean, we all have seen the recent controversy with regards to the election of the Vice President of the United States as well. More dialogue, more areas, apologies, for us to talk about. I believe that we should make room for the next speaker, but before that, Hiranne.
තරංකි කියනවා අපි දේශපාලනය ගැන කතා කරද්දී අතීතයේදී අපි අසමත් වෙලා තියෙනවා. වර්තමානයේ ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙන්නේ නැහැ. එහෙනම් අනාගතයේදී අපි අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙන්නට ඕනේ. ඊට අවශ්‍ය අඩිතාලම පසුබිම මේ වෙනකොට සැකසගෙන යන්න ඕනේ. ඒකට අත්‍යවශ්‍යම වෙන්නේ තාරුණ්‍ය. හේතුව දැනට මේ පාලනය ගෙන යන ප්‍රජාවට මිනිස්සුන්ගේ හැඟීම් තේරුම් ගන්නට බෑ. ඔවුන්ගේ අවශ්‍යතාවයන් තේරුම් ගැනීමේ අවම මට්ටමක් තියෙන. ඒ සඳහා තාරුණ්‍යයෙන් පෙළ ගැසෙන්නට ඕනේ. විශේෂයෙන් කාන්තා නියෝජනයේදී අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන කාන්තා ප්‍රජාවක් තාමත් පාර්ලිමේන්තුගත වෙන්නේ නැහැ. එහෙම නැත්නම් කාන්තා නායකත්වයේ කියන දේ තාමත් ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ අත්‍යවශ්‍ය මට්ටමටවත් නෙවෙයි සෙන්ඩ්‍රෝ, අවශ්‍ය මට්ටමටවත් ඇවිල්ලා නැති තැනක තියෙන්නේ.
We were talking about democracy and youth, and in this topic we have the rest of the three speakers left to address to you on their opinions. Let's have Shimar Ahmed.
Ladies and gentlemen, Winston Churchill once said the best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter. Please take this into consideration over the next 5 minutes, next 3 minutes. 31 years ago, 28 countries across the globe came together to declare that youth have the right to participate in any matter or procedure affecting their lives. But honestly, to me, taking part doesn't only mean being there, being present at one council like this, but actually having authentic roles that allow you to take meaningful decisions is what they should have implemented. This was not seen. Moving forward, let's think about the places that the youth of Sri Lanka actually inhabit. All right? So there are schools, there are community-based programs, there are families. But are the youth allowed to take authentic roles in these situations, or even allowed to make meaningful decisions in comparison to their lives? No. Out of the population in the world, 50.5% is aged below the age of 30 years old, out of which 2/3 of the countries do not consult young people in the development of poverty reduction or national plans or anything of that sort. Have you ever heard of the term generation democracy? Any one of you? Well, it's an organization consisting of young leaders from across the globe, young leaders from different nations coming together to forge one vision. It's a connected global network of leaders from 70 different countries who are committed, connected, and passionate about generating new ideas in order to tackle democracy across the world, right? In countries such as our very own, most of the youth believe that they need to come out on the streets in order to protest and make various issues come into light. This is what the third world countries actually do, because the youth is normally not heard. But it's actually a very sad issue that even today, this is the only way we can actually make a difference in the political era. Moving forward, we arrive at the final question, which of course is, how can we engage in politics? Well, a few days ago, amongst the train of thoughts, I stumbled upon an experience of mine, and I wrote this line or these sentences about how I felt about this situation. You'll find the leaders of youth across many borders and organizations, but out of them, you will find many to be wrong. And obviously, you will find your one to be right. But ladies and gentlemen, remember this. You can't bring about a revolution or yet even a simple solution when you can't even follow the actions of your own preach. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Shimmer, for that very insightful speech. Something that he mentioned at the end was, if you do not, along the lines of, if you do not practice what you preach, then how can you expect somebody to follow your role model? And I believe that it is true in a certain way when it comes to a democracy itself. He mentions about organizations that fight for proper democracies around the world, such as Generation Democracy, etc., that are comprised of over 70 countries, 70 nations, if I'm not mistaken, Shimmer, around the world. And we need more of these organizations. But more than that, we also need, he mentions, certain youth in proper positions of responsibility that can actually implement solutions, something that I believe Tarangi and the other speakers mentioned along those lines as well. And among many important points, he mentioned these, I believe more that can be discussed in the discussion round. Hiranne?
ශිවර් කියන විදිහට ජාතීන් විශාල ගණනාවක් නියෝජනය කරන විදිහට ලෝකේ ඇති වෙලා තියෙන සංගම් ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදය වෙනුවෙන් කතා කරන අවස්ථා තියෙද්දි ඒ වගේ දේවල් නිර්මාණය වෙලා තියෙද්දි යෝන් නායකත්වය වෙනුවෙන් සටන් වදින්නට පුළුවන්. ලංකාවේ තාරුණ්‍යයට සටන් කරන්නට තියෙන එකම අවස්ථාව උද්ඝෝෂණද. පාරට බැහැලා සටන් පාට කියාගෙන තමන්ගේ ඉල්ලන්න තියෙන එකද තියෙන එකම අවස්ථාව. හැබැයි සෙන්ඩ්‍රෝ එතනින් එහාට තවමත් ලංකාවේ තාරුණ්‍යයට හඬ නගන්න අවස්ථාවක් ලැබිලා නැහැ. අපි අන්න ඒ නිසයි සීතල ඊතල වැඩසටහනින් අද කතා කරන්නේ ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදය සහ තාරුණ්‍ය මොන විදිහටද එකිනෙකට සම්බන්ධ වෙන්නේ කියලා. ඒ වෙනුවෙන් යුතුයකම් ඉටු කරන්නට පුළුවන්, තීරණ ගන්න පුළුවන් ඔබට අපි ආයාචනා කරනවා තරුණයින්ටත් අවස්ථාව දෙන්නට ක්‍රියාමාර්ග ගන්න කියලා. We'll see what is going to tell next by Shanice Fazil.
ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදය සහ යෞවනය, democracy and youth. අද වෙනකොට ලෝකයේ ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදය තියෙනවා, සමාජවාදය තියෙනවා, ඒකාධිපතිවාදය තියෙනවා. මේකෙදී ඒකාධිපතිවාදයේදී මිනිස්සුන්ට කිසිම බලයක් නැහැ රට වෙනුවෙන් තීරණයක් කිසිම ආකාරයේ දෙන්න. ඒක ඒකාධිපතිවාදය කියලා අපි කියනවා. සමාජවාදයේදී ඒක පොඩ්ඩක් ලිහිල් වෙනවා. ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදයේදී මගේ කෝණය අනුව ඒකේ ගොඩක් නිදහස මිනිස්සුන්ට තියෙනවා. අපි කොහොමද පාලනය කරන්න ඕනේ, කවුද පාලනය කරන්න ඕනේ, අපි කොහොමද ජීවත් වෙන්නේ කියලා. දැන් මේ ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදය අනුව තමයි අද වෙනකොට අපි ලංකාව ගෙනියන්නේ. ඒ කියන්නේ අපිට කියන්න පුළුවන් ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදය කියන්නේ සමාජය විසින් සමාජය වෙනුවෙන් පත් කරන ලද පාලන ක්‍රමයක් කියලා. එතකොට දැන් අපිම පත් කරපු මේ පාලන ක්‍රමේ එක එක වැරදි තිබ්බා. දැන් අපි මෙතන දැක්කා දක්ෂ කතිකයෝ ඇවිල්ලා කියනවා මේ පාලන ක්‍රමේ තියෙන වැරදි මොනවාද කියලා. හැබැයි අපි හිතුවද දැන් අපිම පත් කරන මේ පාලන ක්‍රමේ ඇයි මෙහෙම වැරදි තියෙන්න පුළුවන් කියලා. දැන් මාත් එක්ක ආගියු කරන්න පුළුවන් මේක මම කොච්චර වෝට් කරන්න ගියත් there's only just one set of people whoever I vote I have to vote. That's at least the part that I can do. එතකොට දැන් මං අහන්න කැමති ඔයා වෝට් කරන එක විතරද ඔයාගේ ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදී අයිතිය කියලා කියන්නේ. අද වෙනකොට අපිට පුළුවන් මේ තව එක්කෙනෙක් මට ඇවිල්ලා කිව්වා නෑ අපිට පාට බහැලා අපිට සටන් කරන්න පුළුවන් කියලා. අපි ඇත්තටම මේක කරන්න පුළුවන්. හැබැයි අපිම ඒක දැන් හැම දෙයකටම පාට බහැලා දැන් ඒකේ තියෙන අර ගැඹුර ඒකේ තියෙන ග්‍රැවිටි එක අපි නැති කරගෙන ඉවර. හරි? ඊට පස්සේ මම ඇහුවා එතනින් එහාට අපිට මොනවද කරන්න පුළුවන්? හර්තාල් ව්‍යාපාර එහෙම කරා කියලා දැන් පාලනය වෙනස් වෙයිද? දැන් අපි ඉතිහාස පොතේ ඉගෙනගෙන තියෙනවා රට වටේ හර්තාල් ගිහිල්ලා ඩඩ්ලි සේනානායක මහත්තයා හරිද අගමැති වෙලා ඉන්න කාලේ he had the courtesy to give up the government because he said that okay I can't handle it anymore. Okay? අද වෙනකොට ඉන්න පාලකයෝ ඒක කරයිද? එතකොට මං අහන්න ඕනේ අපි මේ වගේ හැමෝටම බැන නැත්තම් මේක අඩුපාඩු කිය ඉන්න එක හරිද? මං කියන්න කැමති උදාහරණයක් ඇටියෙන් වෙන රටක් ගන්න. මට අවස්ථාවක් ලැබුණා සිංගප්පූරු රාජ්‍ය ගිල නිරීක්ෂණය කරන්න. එතකොට මට දැනගන්න ලැබුණ දෙයක් තමයි මට ඉන්නවා grade 4 ඒ කියන්නේ 4 වසරේ නංගි කෙනෙක්. මට යාව තනියම රෑ 12ට උනා පාර ඇතැල්ල දාලා එන්න පුළුවන්. මට ඒ විශ්වාසය එකපාරට ආවා. විදේශිකයෙක් වෙලා මට ඒ විශ්වාසය ආවා. ඊට පස්සේ තමයි මම කතා කරේ මිනිස්සුත් එක්ක. ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදී පාලන ක්‍රමයක් තිබ්බට ඉස්සෙල්ලාම මිනිස්සු ඒ පාලන ක්‍රමයට අවස්ථාව දුන්නා. දැන් ඉන්න කට්ටියට බැන හිටියෙත් නැහැ, තියෙන අඩුපාඩු කී හිටියෙත් නැහැ. ඒ ඉන්න කට්ටියට ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ සහයෝගය දුන්නා. අනිත් එක තමයි අද අපි අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම දියුණු වෙන්න ඕන තැනක ඉන්නේ. අපි අනිවාර්යෙන් දියුණු වෙන්න ඕනේ. ඒ තියෙද්දි අපි එක්කෙනාට බැනගෙන, එක්කෙනාට බිහිලු කරගෙන අද වෙනකොට මේ රණ්ඩු වෙනවා පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ පොඩි ළමයි වගේ. දියුණු වෙන එක පැත්තක දාලා. එතකොට අපි ඇත්තටම අවධානය යොමු කරන්න ඕනේ කොතනද? අපි අවධානය යොමු කරන්න ඕනේ දියුණු වෙන්න. ඒ නිසා මදක් සිතලා බලන්න. අලුත් ක්‍රමයකට අපිට යන්න වෙනවා. ඒ අලුත් ක්‍රමය මොකක්ද කියලා අපි හිතන්න ඕනේ. Thank you for the time.
Thank you very much Shanice. Shanice කතාව පටන් ගද්දිම විවිධාකාරයේ පාලන ක්‍රම පිළිබඳව අපිට කියලා දුන්නා. ජනරජයක් විදිහට අපි ශ්‍රී ලංකාව හඳුන්වන්නේ ශ්‍රී ලංකා ප්‍රජාතාන්ත්‍රික සමාජවාදී ජනරජය කියලා. ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රයත් සමාජවාදයත් කියන කොටස් දෙකම ඒකාබද්ධ කරගෙනයි අපි රටක් විදිහට එකට යන්නේ. ඉදිරියට යන්නේ. නමුත් අපි තවමත් මේ දියුණුව වෙනුවෙන් සටන් කරද්දී එකිනෙකාට බැන වැදිමින් එකිනෙකාගේ අඩුපාඩු පෙන්වා දීමකට වැඩිය වෙනුවෙන් ගැටුම් ඇති කරගනිමින් උසුළු විසුළු කරමින් මෙන්න මේ විදිහට තමයි අපි ප්‍රශ්න විසඳන්නට හුරු වෙලා තියෙන රටක් විදිහට. නමුත් තාරුණ්‍යයට මේකට බලපෑමක් කරන්න පුළුවන්ද කොහොමද කියන කරුණයි ෂෙනිස් කතාව තුළින් ඉස්මතු කරන්න උත්සාහ කරේ. සැන්ඩ්‍රෝ.
Definitely. Hirana, if you just take a normal Twitter comment about anything political, you would see 1,000 people blaming each other, blaming the system and literally anything including blaming everywhere. So what does this tell us? This tells us something important that Shanice was telling us. Everybody likes to blame, and the other speakers as well. Everybody likes to blame, but nobody wants to take part in the system and make actual change to fight against the tide. That is rare. And even if it is rare, that opportunity is rarely given, some limited as well, as Tarangi mentioned earlier with regards to female representation and other challenges. So what did, thank you very much, Shanice. You pointed out something very important, and I believe that something contrasting to that he mentioned was protesting. Is protesting the only solution to everything? And if so, like he mentioned with his examples, that had a certain power, but it was overused by the public to an extent that right now, if the public were to do that, it would not make any change at all. And furthermore, I believe that the next speaker can, Hiranya, definitely add on more points to this conversation. Let's welcome Suleiman Ramiz.
Right. So picking up from where we sort of left off, I can't help but think, like you all very correctly said, that there is more to democracy than just voting. You know, there are some very interesting perspectives that have come about. The first observation I want to make is that voting in democracy is not a means to an end, right? It's just one part of the process. And in these 3 minutes, what I want to do is sort of highlight the other parts of the process and add on to the little bits and pieces that you all have presented. The first point I want to make note of is Tarangi spoke about how young people have a major role to play. In fact, that they need to take over the government. I agree to a certain extent because I have always been an advocate of young people. And I've always said that young people are the leaders of today, not the leaders of tomorrow. But we need to understand that in a larger picture, that young people are only a part of society, and that part of society has a bigger role to play when you take everyone into consideration. So we have a role to play, yes, but it's not the only role. We have to exist sort of as a collective, and there has to be collective initiative. Then Shima spoke about how, you know, there are authentic roles and how, you know, we need meaningful decisions to be taken, which is again fantastic. And which leads me to my primary point here. Now, as a young person in a democracy, in civil society, we play multiple roles. We need to understand that we are part of a functioning democracy even if we do what we want to do. As a doctor, as a lawyer, as an engineer, as the bus driver who takes the young child to school, as a nurse who has taken an oath, we all play different parts of this democracy. And if we take our role seriously, then that would add to having a good democracy, and I'll tell you why. Because democracy is only good as the people in it. If you don't have educated people, people who can think forward, you know, who can think forward with a proper vision, you're not going to have good leaders in parliament reflecting those thought processes. So essentially, we need to make sure that we invest in the people, and that ties in very nicely with what Shanice said, because he spoke about how Sri Lanka is a socialist country, and that's where the state comes in. The state needs to be investing in education. The state needs to be investing in its future generation because it's circular, right? If the state doesn't invest, then how do you expect good young people to come out of that process? What I want to say is, sort of in a nutshell, democracy is a mechanism of governance, and any government has 3 elements to it, right? The executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. It's a mechanism of checks and balances. As citizens, we have the biggest role to play. We need to make sure that we hold the executive accountable. We need to make sure that we lobby the legislature, and we need to make sure that we use the judiciary. Only then will we be able to sort of oil the mechanisms of democracy and push the entire process forward, because it's not sort of a one-take-all process, you know, where you can go to the streets and fight for what you want. It is very much a part of democracy. And on that point, I would like to make a small clarification. Shima said that it's only in third world countries that you see people coming to the street. I'd like to remind Shima of the United States of America, which is the most powerful country in the world. You saw people coming to the streets for the Black Lives Matter movements. So that is to say that democracy is vibrant, but it's only vibrant as people want it to be.
Hold the executive accountable, lobby the legislative, and use the judiciary. Thank you, Suleiman, for that lovely speech. I want to mention something that he rightfully showcased to all of us, the power of the people in a democracy. I believe in a different light he took us to it. Even the nurse who has taken an oath, or even the bus driver who takes a little kid to the school, has the same role, and if properly fulfilled that role to the most best that he or she can, it would create a lasting impact. Because he mentioned once again, thank you, Suleiman, a democracy is only as good as the people in it. And if the people have deteriorated virtues, deteriorated qualities, then so would surface in the democracy and the political and social background overall in a country as well. And I believe that that does have a certain bitterness of truth when it comes to Sri Lanka as well. He mentioned many points, and definitely ones of controversy that the other speakers would like to add on to as well. Hirane?
සුලේමාන් කියන විදිහට සැන්ඩ්‍රෝ ඔබත් මාත් මේ 6 දෙනාම ඇතුළු කොටගත්ත අපි හැමෝම ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදයේ කොටස්කරුවන්. කුමන ශේෂ්ත්‍ර එක කුමන හෝ භූමිකාවක් ඔබ නිරූපණය කළත් ඔබ ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදයේ කොටස්කරුවන්. තීරණ ගන්න හැකියාව තියෙන දේශපාලඥයින් වේවා තීරණ ගන්න පුද්ගලයෙක් කවරෙක් හෝ වේවා ඔවුන් ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙන්නට කලින් අපි අපේ යුතුයකම් කොටස ඉටු කරන්නට පුළුවන් නම් අපිට එකමුතු වෙලා වැඩ කරන්නට පුළුවන් නම් අපි තව කෙනෙක් අපි වෙනුවෙන් තීරණ ගන්නකම් ඉන්න අවශ්‍ය වෙන්නේ නැති වෙයි කියන කරුණ සුලේමාන් ඉස්මතු කරලා දෙනවා.
Democracy and youth. Let me ask a question from all the 6 speakers. Why don't you want to get into politics? Or do you not want to? And why? An open-ended question that silence itself tells a lot of things, I believe. But yes.
I don't think anyone said that they don't want to get into
Exactly.
politics. It's just a matter of when or if and why.
Yes. So when and why not? And why? If why, why?
Well, I think basically it's what the politics of our nation portrays already, right? I think the youth has openly been disgusted by what it has portrayed so far, and I don't think any of the youth wants to get into that because they will automatically be titled amongst the same caliber, right? And I think it's I think hopefully I speak for everyone when I say that is the reason why the youth mostly, are backward in terms of getting into politics, and they seek for opportunities mostly in the corporate world, especially abroad, because in Sri Lanka as it is developing and stuff, the youth is, of course, like all of us mentioned, it's always held backward and not given the opportunity most of the time. But there are some striking youth who's actually made it up the ladder. I'm not going to lie, but that's only a small majority of the entire population.
I wouldn't just say that it's limited to reputation, because if you look at the system, well, number one, look at the salaries. And I'll draw a comparison, right? Shanice bought Singapore. Do you know that the head of state of Singapore is the highest paid person in Singapore? Of course, keeping the big conglomerates out of it. That's a massive statement. But if you take any of the public offices in Sri Lanka, the salary you get is not incentive enough to genuinely work. And that leads to another problem, because the people who get into public office obviously get into public office with the intention of a corrupt mechanism, that they want to make money out of it. So it's a bad system. It's designed in such a way that the people that are going into it, not all of them, but a large majority of them are not going with the right intentions.
And the other thing is I would like to bring up is that as if we imagine that we 6 went to parliament from the same party, just wanting good to people, and we try to play a big role. But when it comes to playing a big role, parliament itself has authority stages, so we'll be at the bottom. We won't get into the top as we go in. Let's be honest, because Sri Lankan people have been used to being what is called general, like in general, they are always in one party, the whole family, from grandfather to father to son. So that barrier have to break. So breaking that barrier, even though we go inside, majority of us will be contempt, and we will not be having our voices inside our parliament, because that my father always says, just because a dog barks, we can't bark as a dog, because they can go to that level, but we can't go. So if we have to go to that level, we have to go into a mud pit and then come up again. So I don't think anyone would want that.
And if I could conclude, or if I could add the statement to everything the speakers have been telling, rather than the salary itself that Suleiman said, or the fact that we don't start at a higher place, I think it has the reason. I think I can break into two parts. First would be the people the type of the people who want to get into politics. There are two types of people, right? People who actually can work and people who can't work. And if you take the people who can work, most of the people, they are better off being someone at a corporate and doing something that they could work as a CEO rather than being a politician, because when you become a politician, there's so much shade that is thrown at you. I mean, just take the current president for an example. When he was not the candidate, the entire country loved him. But after he became the candidate, half of the country hated him and half of the country loved him. So if you are genuinely someone who wants to do something in the country, why do you want to be a politician and get shade thrown at you and just destroy your character itself when you can do same? You can even do sometimes even better by being a corporate CEO. So I think that is if I could complete the statement.
Not just to add on, right, before you complete, not just the person's character, but you also have to think about family.
Exactly.
Because you're putting your family on the spotlight as well.
Exactly, and sometimes threats come to the family. So people who could be much better off doing something else rather than trying to put your loud family in the spotlight and trying to get shade thrown at them. I think the American president, Joe Biden, his son Hunter Biden was in the spotlight with the Ukrainian issue, Ukrainian scandal, just because his father wants to be the president of the United States. I mean, no one wants to get that done. And that is exactly why the visionary people don't want to get into politics. And then what happens is that there are people who can't do anything, who are left there, and they are the people who come into politics, and that's why the entire system is failing. So I think that concludes that.
But that's not necessarily the issue. You do have some fantastic people in politics. You have good-hearted people who can work, who have done work, making change because they want to, genuinely see a difference. And there are people, you keep everything aside and get into it. It's just a matter of getting more of those people in there, because right now they're outnumbered, right?
Okay, exactly, they're outnumbered. So when you want to work, you either have to pick one party, and when you pick a party, survive there, you have to, despite you coming with good intentions, you can't continue with those, because in order for you to survive, you sometimes have to take some of that shade and some of that, be a part of those black deals. Otherwise, you will not be able to survive with the party that you are in. So that's the issue why, even though there are people who are coming in, good people, they can't continue the good intentions that they came up with.
I think that comes back to society, because all of this fake news is consumed by who? The people at the end of the day, right?
We choose to consume.
Yeah, and who elects these incompetent people to begin with? Again, the people.
අනික ඒකට තව දෙයක්. දැන් අලුත් ජනරජය පත් වෙලා මේ මිනිස්සු ඇත්තටම හොඳ දෙයක් කරන්න ඕන කිය මේ දේශපාලනයෝ ආවට එතන ඇතුලේ දැන් ඉන්න කට්ටිය කරන්න දෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒගොල්ලන්ම කරපු වැරදි ඒ කාලේට එළියට එනකොට දැන් කියමුකෝ මම ණයක් ගත්තා කියලා මම ණයක් අරන් ඊළඟ දවසේ මම පැරදෙනවා. හැබැයි ඒකේ පොලිය ගියන්න ඕනේ මට පස්සේ කෙනෙක් කෙනාට. එතකොට එයාට හරි එක වැඩක්වත් කරන්න දෙන්නේ නැහැ. එතකොට අපි හැමෝම බනින්නේ දැන් ඔයාට මොනවත් කරන්න බෑ. ඔයා කෑ ගහුවා ඔයාට මොනවත් කරන්න බෑ. අර ගැටේ ගහන්න ලේසි, ගැටේ ලිහන්න හරි අමාරුයි.
And just if I can add one more thing, keeping politicians aside, if you take the public system, can anyone get a water connection, an electricity connection, a pass on building approval, whatever the council it is, without paying a bribe? The people are very much part of the corrupt process. They have made it their, means of survival. You have people working in the public sector driving massive vehicles, which you clearly know they can't afford if they're not involved in a corrupt system.
That brings me to a point. What do you all think about nepotism and how does it corrode with democracy? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's not really about, I think you shouldn't call it nepotism if the person has merit. For example, I would take the current Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau. His father was one of the first Prime Ministers in Canada, and the person had enough merit to become the current Prime Minister of Canada. He won the popular vote twice, if I'm not mistaken. So I think nepotism is an issue where you are not being elected or being chosen by people based on your merit, but because your parents or your predecessors were in the politics. So I think it's more about trying to, again, I think the finger should be pointed at ourselves. If you're going to, when you're voting someone just because their predecessor was in the parliament, we are the people who give them the opportunity to be nepotistic. So it's our fault again. I think we should just see who the person is and vote based on merit as opposed to voting based on if their father is. Some candidate, the slogan was, "My father was the president of the Sri Lanka," and that shouldn't be the case anymore. And we should be more holistic and more inquisitive in trying to vote people based on merit.
But just to add on to that, sometimes it's also about choice, right?
Yeah.
say if it's two parties and you have one candidate per party, you're forced to vote for the candidates that you have. So I think that's where sort of nepotism might come into play, where you give the only opportunity or limited opportunities to people you're affiliated with. It doesn't have to be blood relatives. It can be someone you owe a favor to, you know, maybe someone who pumped a lot of money into your election campaign. So there is definitely a bad system.
Adding on to that, I think we should nip it in the bud. So the person doesn't come to the president itself, right? Except for a few exceptions, they come first go to the parliament, then come to the presidency and so on. So if you could nip it in the bud without giving the person the opportunity to get into the parliament itself, I think that would be a better option, because you have so many options during the parliamentary election as opposed to a presidential election. Just adding on to your point.
And a question to Tarangi and Lahan as well. Suleiman mentioned earlier that voting is not a means to an end. There's more to it. Lahan, you also mentioned some variables that are apart from politics itself that count into democracy. What are your thoughts on this, and how do you think that the people should be aware of this more? Because I don't think a lot of people are aware more than politics itself. What is it that democracy really holds?
Yes, Andrew. Great point. So, like I said, there are a few corner stands or corner steps for democracy to make it valuable. Like I said, equality, and especially I should mention a part where it says consent. In consent, actually, even in the current situation, consent is a really important thing. Even in a marriage, if the wife or the husband is having a matrimonial relationship, but you can't have a forceful relationship with them, the wife should give their consent always. That's democracy. But I haven't seen it. Like, if the father, beg your pardon, no, father, let's take it as the husband. If the husband says, no, you shouldn't work today, the wife says, okay. Do they have a conversation? Is there a consent? No. I think people should look into democracy more in a way that it gives a value towards the corner stands as well, not only for voting.
Let's go into the speakers' final consensus on today's topic. Tuhan?
Thank you, Sandro. And I have just one concluding note. So for the people who would like to come and take part in the democratic process and be a candidate for the elections, I think it's okay. And I personally have some friends who want to do that, and I really hope people who have merit will more take part in, who try to be candidates. And others, I just want to say that if you are not someone who's willing to get okay with shade thrown at you, I think you should try to analyze the policies and vote for someone based on policies, and actually follow up and see if they actually do that, rather than as opposed to voting them when they come again in another 5 years. So just follow up, or be yourself and take part in the process itself. Yes, that's what I want to share with you. Thank you.
So I'm sure most of you are blaming the system and keeping up your legs over and sitting out at your couch and eating food and blaming the system. That's the practical thing we all do. Even I do it myself, but I have changed myself by thinking about the real democracy. So I invite everyone, the youth, to join hands and work towards our country, towards the real democracy, and bring something new to this table, to this country, and develop within it.
Sandra, what I would like to say is a little clarification also to what Suleiman said. I didn't mean that the youth should take over the parliament or democracy, as much as that youth should get involved, that they should take more interest in it, the same way where I don't think the whole parliament should be full of female representatives, but I do believe that we need to have more female representatives in parliament, right? And the reason that I think that more youth should be in the parliament is because this is our future. This is the laws that we make today are for ourselves and for the generations after us. I believe that it is very important for the youth to get involved in the parliamentary system, because that is the only place that we can actually change laws. And that's also why, like I've always said, even in these forums, why women should get involved is because there are lots of laws that are discriminatory towards women, and unfortunately we haven't seen the men being able to change that stance. And with the 5% of female representatives that we have presently in parliament, we haven't been able to make that change. And like what Dr. Harni Amarsurya once once said that she needs to look over many men to find another woman there, and that might be the reason why our laws haven't changed. So I believe that with youth representatives, of course, having said that, youth persons who think for the betterment of everybody, so men and women alike, same way female representatives, we need to elect them, we need to vote for them, we need to make an environment where it is possible and easy for them to actually be able to contest. Political parties need to make that space, society needs to make that space, and with more youth participants, with more female representatives, I think we can change laws and make this country a better country.
Well, I believe that the whole reason autocracy was taken out of the picture and democracy was introduced into the picture is only because it was the people's choice, because then that way you have no one to blame for if, you know, if something goes wrong, it's obviously your fault, it's our fault, right? So in everyone's best of interests, one piece of advice I'd like to give all of you out there is take actions into your own hand. That does not mean you go out on the road and riot, but what it means is start small, start off with simple steps like help one another out, and you'll see yourself grow as a country together. Because in the end of the day, you can't bring about a revolution if you can't be part of the solution you wish to see. Thank you.
අතරම මම දකින්න මෙතන ඇවිල්ලා අපි සමාජයක් වශයෙන් මේ ගොඩනගලා තියෙන ව්‍යවස්ථාව නැත්තම් මේ පාලන ක්‍රමය අපි මේ හෙලා දකිනවා දැන්. නමුත් ඒක හෙලා දැකලා දැන් අපි ඇත්තටම ඇති වෙලා තියෙනවා. අපි දැන් කරන්න ඕන දේ ඇවිල්ලා මේ අපි දැන් තුන්වෙනි ලෝකේ රටක් හැටියට හිටියා ඇති. ආරයට මෙයාට ඇඟිලි දික් කරන්න නැතුව අපිම ඉස්සෙල්ලාම අපේ ඇතුලේ වෙනස් වෙන්න ඕනේ. අනිත් කට්ටියට කියන්න කලින්. එතකොට තමයි අපි දන්නේ කොහොමද වෙනසක් ඇති කරන්න ඕනේ කියලා. ඊට පස්සේ දැන් තියෙන ආණ්ඩුවට නැත්තම් පාලන ක්‍රමයට වැරදි කීක ඉන්නව වෙනුවට ඒගොල්ලන් කරන පොඩ්ඩක් හරි හොඳ දෙයට අපි උදව් කරන්න ඕනේ. ඒකයි මගේ පණිවිඩය.
I feel like we need institutional change. There has to be campaign financing. Like Tarangi very correctly said, you need to make the environment more conducive, where you have more young people, more women, and more average people getting into parliament and being able to make these policies. Without setting the right environment, it's always going to be an uphill battle. It's always going to be a biased approach, and that's something that we cannot afford to have as a functioning democracy.
ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදයේ මූල බීජ ඔබේ නිවස වෙන්නට පුළුවන් කියලා ඔබ මීට කලින් හිතලා තිබ්බද? නැහැ නේද? ඔබ තරුණ අවදියේ දරුවන් ඉන්න පවුලක සමාජිකයෙක් වෙන්නට පුළුවන්. එහෙම නැත්නම් තවමත් කුඩා දරුවන් ඉන්න පවුලක සමාජිකයෙක් වෙන්නට පුළුවන්. කුමන හෝ සමාජ මට්ටමක කුමන හෝ පවුල් පසුබිමක ඔබ ජීවත් වුණත් ඔබේ තරුණ දරුවන්ට අදහස් ඉදිරිපත් කරන්නට, ඔවුන්ගේ අදහස් අනුව ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙන්නට ඔවුන්ට පොඩි අවස්ථාවක් ලබා දෙන්න. මොකද එවිට ඔවුන් පාසල් මට්ටමේදී ඔවුන්ගේ අදහස් ඉදිරිපත් කරමින් ඔවුන්ගේ අදහස් පාසල තුළ ස්ථාපිත කරන්නට උත්සාහ කරයි. එවිට ඔවුන්ට දවසක තමන්ගේ තීරණ ගන්න පුළුවන් රටේ වටිනාම ජව සම්පන්නම තරුණ ප්‍රජාව විදිහට රටක අනාගතයේ බාරගත් දවසක නිවැරදි තීරණ ගන්නට අවස්ථාව ලැබේ. අන්න ඒ නිසා අපි අද පටන් තරුණයින්ට නිසි තැන දෙමු. ඔවුන්ට අවශ්‍ය තීරණ ගන්නට, නිවැරදි තීරණ ගන්නට අවස්ථාව දෙමු. වැඩිහිටියන් වශයෙන් ඔබ ඔවුන්ට අවශ්‍ය නිසි උපදෙස් වගකීම් පැහැදිලි කරලා දෙන්න. ඒ වගේමයි ආදරණීය ප්‍රේක්ෂක ප්‍රජාව තුළ ඉන්නව නම් තීරණ ගන්නට පුළුවන් රට තුළ ජීවත් වෙන පුරවැසියන්, එහෙමත් නැත්නම් රටින් පිට ජීවත් වෙන තීරණ ගන්නට එකහෙලා එකතු වෙන්නට පුළුවන් ඔබ. ශ්‍රී ලංකාව තුළ ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදය ඇති කරන්නට, මේ ස්ථාපිත ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදය වැඩි දියුණු කරන්නට තරුණයින්ට සහයෝගය ලබා දෙන්න, අවස්ථාවන් වැඩියෙන් ලබා දෙන්න.
A democracy is only as good as the people in it. And I do believe that you may be a policymaker, you may be an average citizen, but it is up to you, a challenge being given by the awareness of Seethala Eethala to become a better person and to become a better individual to contribute to society. Far away in the Indian Ocean, there's an island. Some call it a pearl, some call it Serendip, some call it Ceylon, but now it is the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka. That's it for tonight's episode. See you next week. This is Charana TV's Seethala Eethala.